original.
He wants the original.
I will not be original.
Oh, you won't be original. Oh, okay.
Because just as I was struggling with traffic coming in here, somebody calls me from a friend who happens to be in another country at this time. And he had tried to call me earlier, and I was in the other meeting I was in. And he says, what are you so busy with? I said, I'm battling traffic to get to a meeting, I'm running late. So what is this meeting about? Well, I'm supposed to answer the question that you've just given me now.
Yes.
That's all I knew. And so she says, so what are you going to say? I said, what would you say? That's why I say I'm not being original. He says, well, please, just say, if the LGBTI community wants to be considered as normal, they must just do normal things and dress normally and not do these parades that make them people look like they cannot fit in. So, there is this word that is used that called queer, and I don't know where it comes from, but they like living up to it and looking queer. That nobody wants to identify with them in that way.
Yeah.
That's what she said. I said, I'm not being original.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're saying people need to change the way they are to fit into...
No, I'm not saying that.
Okay.
I'm saying that, I guess I'm a contextual theologian. I like to believe that you work with people from where they are, if you're going to change them.
Okay.
And if you don't want to, if you really want to change them, you've got to say, okay, where's the starting point? Even if I want to get them to get there, I will not stand there and say, come over to me.
Yeah. Yes.
I will say, all right, where are you?
Yes. Yes.
If it's corporate,
Absolutely.
it's corporate.
Yes.
Now, what's corporate culture? How am I going to transform the corporate culture? It's kind of like, I mean, there's always an issue against an interest approach, but that is an interest approach. It may or may not work depending on the context.
Yeah.
There are places where you believe it really, the right thing is a shock treatment.
Yes.
There are places where you say, look, if I'm going to be here for the long haul,
Yes.
I'm going to make them accept that I just have a different orientation, but I'm a regular person in some way. There's a way in which you want to do that as well. That's really the point I'm making. If you're going to be elected bishop of that diocese in the United States, you're going to come there looking like one of them.
Yeah. You fit in. You fit in. Thank you, Bishop. Yes, Justin.
Alice, I'd like to take up what the Bishop has just said. I think that it's partly a question of strategy, as you say. And of course, the success of the gay marriage movement, the LGBTI marriage movement in America, the big successes came when they got people to say, we are not different, we're claiming equality because we're the same, not because we're different. But I've got misgivings about that beyond strategy. I concede the strategy. And I think that we are about difference, and I think it's important for us to assert our difference. And it's important for us to assert that there are different ways of being, and I don't think the Bishop was denying that. But I want to give an example from my own life. I've never had the courage to get into drag. And I don't feel anything other than shame about that. I can still change, by the way. Although many of your church fellows get into drag all the time. Including His Holiness, the Holy Father, the Pope. So, I mean, it's as RuPaul said, we're born naked and everything else is drag after that. So, I'd wear a dress in court. I'd wear the Constitutional Court. Doesn't wear the traditional robes of the English Senior Council. It wears a specially designed robe, which is like a dress. But I've never done what I think, and this is the point I really want to make, that the extraordinary courage in our movement came from people who were visibly and courageously different. Stonewall was drag queens, transgender people who said to the police, this is 1969, the summer of 1969, we're drawing a line there. And I'm proud of everyone on the gay parade who says to the rest of Africa and South Africa, we are different. And we are going to wear those. Who's ever worn a wig here? Put up your hand, show the bishop. Oh, you've worn a wig, well done. Who else has worn a wig? I'm very proud of you. Who's been in drag? Either way, I'm very, very proud of you. Let me say, I pay honor to you because I think that's the true courage. The courage for me, as a white lawyer in the gay movement wearing a black suit, was never the same as it took for one drag queen to go onto the streets of Kampala, and I pay honor to that person.
Yeah.
And can I just answer your question? I can do it in one word. I don't think the activist movement is doing anything wrong. I don't think they're doing enough of it.
Okay.
We've got it. We want everything you're doing, and we want more of it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Let me just quit that. Let me just quit that. I think that you're making a very important point about climbing onto a plateau in social terms. I remember a time when, I think those of us who are old enough will remember a time when the feminist movement started, where women were throwing bras away and panties away, and that was a shock treatment. But you know what? It was their way of saying, hey, we're free.
Yeah.
So yes, indeed. But as I say, that kind of shock treatment makes the statement, like you say. And it's a matter of strategy in every instance.
Can I tell one story, please,
Having
Madam
these
Chair?
two.
I want to tell one story, and it relates to Lindiwe and to what she said about how she's dressed earlier. Does anyone know the activist Phumzile Mthethwa?
Yes.
She comes from Kwatema, and in the very early years of our liberation movement, when Simon and Cordy were still alive, Phumzile and I were on a television program together. It was 1992, and there was a lady called Felicia Mabuza Subtle. Do you remember her?
Yes, we remember her.
And we had this discussion, and she went up to Phumzile, and Phumzile was in a shirt and a tie and a suit. And she said, and you, young lady, you are dressed like this because you want to be a man. So Phumzile said to her, no, I'm not. So she said to her, why are you dressed like this? If you know Felicia Mabuza Subtle, she was easy to rumble her.
Yes.
And Phumzile said to her, I'm dressed like this because I want to be dressed like this. And to me, that was a profound and beautiful answer. I still applaud it after 25 years.
Wow.
And we should all have the entitlement to be dressed like we wish to be dressed like.
Absolutely. And I'm pleased you've said that, because I was going to ask you what you'd say to those who feel a bit like you do, who don't feel comfortable being in drag.
Or who don't
and
have
yet-
the courage.
Or don't have the
Not
courage.
comfort, it's courage.
Well, don't have the courage to be in drag, but feel bad about it because of social pressure, perhaps from the rest of the group, to say maybe you're not authentic enough. And what would you say to that?
I would
I'm
say,
not accusing you of not being authentic enough. Goodness, I
I
just
don't
realized
think
what
you
I
are,
said.
Alice. I'm good in my own skin. I'm happy with my own skin and my suit. I would say that we all are, the bishop and all of us,
Yeah.
are working for a world in which really your dignity will come from your own personhood.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's our joint goal.
Wonderful. Thank you.
It's very hard to follow these two. If I was on Facebook, I would just say what they said, and everyone would understand. I think for me, the strength of the South African breakthrough in '94 was the fact that it kind of allowed us to not end a journey, but begin it, you know. So for me, in South African terms, freedom is really in its infancy, which means that we can shape it, mold it, inform it by the varied experiences that every progressive brings to that space. And I like what Edwin said about celebrating being different. In as much as I celebrated the American push around equality on marriage, it does kind of bring you back to that old age question. So what are we saying? Are we pro-marriage? As a feminist, I'm not okay with that, for example. But I like the idea that people who are in same-sex relations have the choice to be that if that is what they
want.
choose. So I think for me, I would like to say that the LGBTI community could do with more alliances, I think, could be tactically a little bit more agile. And I think the point that Lindiwe is making about operating in the corporate space, when I have always had difficulty with corporates because I'm a leftist and it's hard for me to understand the business rationale. But I think one must accept that that is a reality in which people function. And there's no space, even if one fights it in a bigger struggle, that's not contested. So if there's corporate space, LGBTI people need to be there and contest that space. So I'm not arguing for conformity. I'm saying bring difference, infuse the South African Freedom Project with as many variations as possible. I think that richness is something that, that for me is about the quest rather than the arrival. And I think for me that is really, you know, what this is about.
Thank you very much. You'd already answered the question, you remember? We will. Would you like we'll come back. I want to open up the floor, the last couple of minutes, and then we'll have everybody have half a minute. 1, 2, 3.
Thank you. I'm Kandi from the other foundation. I wanted to, actually, I thought I was going to ask this earlier, but then we had to move on around. You know, the U.S., and this is for the justice, the U.S. Decision from the Supreme Court for same-sex marriage was obviously met with mixed emotions, and one of the justices felt that the court, because of some of the issues that had been raised through the different legislatures and some of the polls that were taken, seemed to suggest that the majority of Americans did not really want same-sex marriage enacted. And so this idea that therefore the court, by doing this, is taking away, you know, the rights of the majority to determine our society. How do you respond to that?
Well, can I answer straight away, Alice?
Could we take 3 and then we'll do the questions?
Certainly.
Good afternoon. My name is Evans Adolfo from Liberia. Sitting here, I'm like, am I in the same space? Because back home in Liberia, you have a panel to have a bishop sit on to talk about LGBT issues. Because when there are issues around LGBT, the first condemnation that you have comes from the church.
Yeah.
Even with the issue of Ebola, the first press statement that came over from the Catholic bishop of the Diocese of Monrovia, he said that God was vexed with for homosexuals in Liberia. That's why Ebola was striking the nation. And looking back, sitting here and listening to the bishop's response, I'm thinking, what kind of background, you know, is he from? Is he not talking about the Bible? Is he not someone who preaches about Jesus? And because if I've ever gone to a gathering and asked a bishop back in my country to say, what do you think about LGBT issue, he would just walk off from in front of me. So I'm sitting here thinking, do we need to replicate the bishop glasses so that his other colleagues can see through them, so that they understand where he speaks? I'm not saying that he's promoting, but the liberalness from his responses, because practically I was in the mass choir of different denominational churches in Monrovia, and I got